Alright, so today we're going to be working on a machine that has no video on the screen, and we're going to be solving something that the Apple recall of this computer could not solve back in 2012 and 13. So this is an 820-2850 motherboard that has no image on the screen when it turns on. So it's turning on right now, but you get no picture on the screen. Now, credit is going to go to Duco at Chipmasters for this because he has been working nonstop to figure this out, and hell if I'm going to take credit for what was his idea, which is related to the problem on the 2008 and 9 model. So what you're going to notice in the 2008 and 9 model A1286 is that it'll be charging, but you'll have a missing power rail, which is PP1V05_S5_MCP, and you'll have 0.3 volts there instead of 1.05 volts there. And the problem is that there is a very little tantalum capacitor on the end of it that is there instead of, let's say, a polymer film or something that is better suited for it. So let me just show you what's going on over there on the schematic. Wireless keyboard, you fucking piece of shit. Here we go. This is what happens when you drop 6 pounds of leaded solder balls into your keyboard. So this buck converter over here, instead of putting out 1.05 volts, will be putting out 0.3 because of this cap. And the solution to fixing this, you can replace it with an electrolytic, you can replace it with a polymer film, you can replace it with anything but a piece of crap tantalum capacitor. And one of the reasons that I've always hated tantalum capacitors is because one of them actually managed to make me sick out of a very, very old audio console. So this thing exploded and I had a 103 fever for almost a week. I've had these capacitors explode in front of me. I'm not going to say that it's the nicest smelling thing in the world, but it doesn't make you sick with a 103 fever. So, I had noticed one time I was heating the board, and I was getting it to the point where it would work again, but I wasn't heating anywhere near enough that I was actually heating the MCP. And right under the point where I was heating was C7771. And let me tell you, it's one thing when you do that once and you figure it out and you feel stupid because you were about to replace things on the other side of the board. It's another when you've actually figured that out. And then you go on a forum, and then you say, I heated the BIOS chip, and it worked again, but I replaced the BIOS. I actually went through that entire process again after having figured it out once, which is just fucking humiliating and dumb. But anyway, what Duco was able to do was apply that same thinking to this motherboard. Again, one of the things I keep telling people is don't replace BGA chipsets when it's not a BGA chip that's at fault. So let's go over to the 820-2850 motherboard and give you an idea what's going on here. So on the third or the fourth page of the schematic, you're going to have a list of all these different power rails. And what I tell you is before you replace any chip, go through and see if any of these power rails are missing. So let's just go over to this page so that you can see the power rails. And one of the power rails that you're going to notice that's missing on this particular machine is one of the 1.8 volt rails for the GPU is actually going to be 1.3, which is a very similar voltage drop to the other machine. So that's going to be, I believe, let's see, you have this. Here we go. So right over here. Let's see, I think I got the name of it wrong here. Frame buffer. Here we go. So right over here. So this is a 1.8 volt power line. And what do you notice? It's a buck converter, which is similar to the other circuit. But what in here looks similar to the circuit that you see over here? Now we go to the 2850. Does anything seem familiar to you? A 330 microfarad polytantalum capacitor. Exact same thing, an exact same problem. The difference is that on the older machine, it'll die completely because the MCP79 is not receiving power. The MCP isn't just for graphics, it's also for functions in the computer like turning on the power rails, and all the other basic functions. On this machine, that tantalum capacitor is on the frame buffer regulator, which is only for the GPU. So the machine will still turn on and work, but you just won't have anything on the GPU because the power to it is too low. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to apply 1.8 volts there and see if it works again with the bench power supply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this coil, L9560, and I'm going to put on this coil 1.8 volts, and we're going to turn it on, and we're going to see if we get anything on the screen. So I'm going to remove the coil to remove the path from the buck converter so it's not interfering with my power supply. And then I'm going to put 1.8 volts right on this point over here. And it's very common that people want to replace the BGA chip or replace the graphics chip, or they think that the $7,000 machine or the BGA rework machine is what's actually solving their problem. The BGA rework machine doesn't solve most of the problems. Circuit rework issues solve the problems. Which is why my personal opinion is that a BGA rework machine for this type of business is just, it's not the best way to make money. It's not an investment that I think you will make back. Unless you have a very specialized workflow doing a very specific job that absolutely requires it. Okay, coil is off. Now to remove our dumpy capacitor. Now we're going to put some solder on here so that I have something to attach my wire to. I don't care if it's particularly crusty or a mix of lead and lead-free because this is for testing purposes anyway. And there's absolutely no reason to care. And I'm going to put a little bit of solder on a ground point so that I can hook up the power supply test probe over there. So this is the internet Cat 5 broken up wire that's coming from the power supply. We're going to put the ground on the screw hole. Solder it right in. And then we take the positive lead, and that's going to get soldered to where the output of the buck converter that's sending 1.8 volts to the GPU would be. There doesn't have to be any amazing soldering. It's not like this is going to be staying here anyway. Okay, so now we're going to turn this on, and we're going to have 1.8 volts going to the GPU during that. And this is a common enough problem that if you Google MacBook Pro video distortion or anything like that in 2010, you'll actually find a page on Apple's website about this. And now the really fucked up part is that this problem had an extended warranty issued for it for a very short period of time. So it expired in 2013, and it was issued years after the machine came out. So very few people actually were able to get their machines fixed under this program, even though it is clearly a defect on the product. But that's Apple. Alrighty. Let's see if this actually works. I had another one with this exact same problem. What I noticed is that I actually got a picture on the screen but no backlight, and there was no reason for the backlight to not be working. .8. Let's see, so voltage 1.8. Current up to 5 amps. It's not like the GPU is doing anything anyway. And on. Well, in this case, the GPU itself is fucked. Oh, in this case, the GPU is actually very fucked. Like, badly fucked. But even if you were to replace the GPU, you wouldn't fix the underlying problem. The reason this happened to the GPU was ripple on that power rail for the frame buffer regulator, the 1.8 volt frame buffer regulator. So you could replace the graphics chip. You're still going to be fucked because your graphics chip's not going to be getting power. At least it's booting now. What if I raise the current? Go. It's better than nothing. But see, again, the point here is if you go to replace a chip without thinking, you will be fucked. And do you think I'm going to try to find the graphics chip to this, which is probably going to be some piece of shit that got pulled off of another board to fix a board that's 5.5 years old that will probably die again? Fuck no. This ain't getting fixed. But hope you learned something.